Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are focusing our attention on a case that is uh, devastating on a personal level, but it's absolutely central to understanding a huge, complex systemic crisis in North America. We're diving deep into the tragic disappearance of Ashley Loring Heavyrunner.
That's right. Ashley, a 20-year-old member of the Blackfeet Nation, vanished from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation in Montana back in June 2017. While the mystery of her specific whereabouts remains unsolved, her case serves as an essential lens through which we must examine the broader crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women, MMIW.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is complex. We need to move past the simple headlines and the tragedy itself to truly understand the structural failures, the systemic cracks issues ranging from impossible resource limitations to jurisdictional paralysis and historical legal decisions that essentially sabotaged this investigation from the moment it began.
And that systemic failure is why this deep dive is crucial. Ashley was a young woman with a future. She was an environmental science student at Blackfeet Community College with plans to attend the University of Montana. She was last seen on the reservation in Browning, Montana in June 2017.
Let's track her movements. The confirmed last sighting was June 5, 2017. Sources confirm she was seen in a video at a party that night on the reservation.
Yeah, that's the last confirmed visual. Initially, though, the family didn't immediately activate the panic button. Ashley, who also goes by Ashley Loring, was 20. She had sometimes lost her phone before, apparently, so they initially thought she might just be visiting a friend or was temporarily out of contact.
Right. When did that initial worry become true alarm, like the real something is wrong moment?
The alarm bells went off hard when she failed to visit her father. He was in the hospital at the time. That was a firm break in her pattern, and that's when her family contacted Blackfeet law enforcement and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA, to report her missing.
And here is where the institutional failure kicks in almost immediately, right? Right at the point of first contact. What was the response they received?
It was, well, shocking is one word, a dismissal, really. Ashley's sister, Kimberly Loring, later recounted this experience, telling The Guardian exactly how law enforcement responded. She said, "No one took it seriously. They just said, she's of age, she can leave when she wants to."
Wow. That initial response is just devastating because it communicates such a lack of urgency. When we talk about finding a missing person, those first 48 to 72 hours are absolutely everything, yet the authorities basically treated it as a choice, not a crisis.
Precisely. And the urgency was actually underscored just a couple of weeks later when a crucial tip surfaced. This tip reported a young woman seen running from a vehicle on U.S. Highway 89 on the reservation the very night Ashley was last seen, June 5th. This should have transformed the case instantly from an adult who left to a high-priority search, but the family was still mostly alone in pushing for that.
Yeah, and that brings us to the operational realities. The Blackfeet Reservation is sprawling 1.5 million acres. Our sources indicate that Blackfeet law enforcement had fewer than 20 officers covering that entire area. That's not just a shortage, that's, well, an impossible workload for proper policing, let alone searching.
It's physically impossible. And this resource deficit is a huge part of why the family ended up taking the lead on the investigation, essentially becoming their own search team. They went to the area identified by that Highway 89 tip and began searching themselves.
And they found evidence, actually found physical evidence.
They did. This is where you see the sheer dedication, really, doing the job that probably should have been done by law enforcement much sooner. Ashley's family found a sweater and a pair of boots with what appeared to be red stains. They believed the items belonged to Ashley, and they turned them over to the authorities.
Okay, so we have a tip. Physical evidence found by the family, and still there was no large-scale, coordinated federal effort. This is where the bureaucratic nightmare starts, the jurisdictional pileup, as you called it.
It is a terrible situation, yeah. Because Ashley vanished on reservation land, you immediately have like 3 potential agencies with some level of control: the tribal police, the BIA, which is the federal agency responsible for policing reservation land, and the FBI, which handles major crimes on reservations.
That sounds like 3 chefs in one kitchen, but maybe none of them are agreeing on the menu or even who's in charge, who held the card at first.
The BIA seemed to be the primary agency initially, and for months they apparently clung to that initial theory that Ashley was just an adult free to leave. 2 full months passed before the BIA focused any serious attention on the disappearance. Then, the FBI, who have the specialized resources and, crucially, the jurisdiction for major crime, only joined the investigation in February 2018.
February 2018, that's 8 months later.
8 months. And they only joined after the BIA finally requested their assistance. By that time, the source material explicitly states the case was considered cold. That delay, caused entirely by bureaucratic inertia and, frankly, jurisdictional confusion, is functionally the same as ignoring the case entirely when those initial weeks were so critical.
That 8-month failure is deeply frustrating to hear about. And Ashley's case, while devastatingly unique to her family, is sadly part of a much larger pattern. Let's connect this to the broader MMIW crisis. The speed, or lack thereof, with which her case was handled seems to feed directly into those horrific national statistics.
It does. The numbers are staggering, and they point to a profound safety crisis. According to the National Crime Information Center, in 2020 alone, there were 5,295 reports of missing American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls. And in some areas, the reality is even more gruesome. Indigenous women face a murder rate that is more than 10 times the national average. It's shocking.
What's fascinating here, in a grim way, is that the community is often forced to generate its own accurate data because federal tracking is inadequate. You mentioned the Sovereign Bodies Institute, or SBI. They actively track MMIW cases in the U.S. and Canada.
That database is crucial, absolutely, because it serves as a community audit, really, of the government's failure to track these cases seriously. As of August 2021, the SBI database held 4,749 names. And what brings this full circle, quite personally, is that the founder of the SBI, Anita Hetofela Porteki-Lukizi, actually taught Ashley at Blackfeet Community College. She personally entered Ashley's name into that database.
Wow. So the creation of this data isn't some dry academic exercise. It's an active form of resistance against official erasure, essentially. But to understand why this crisis has been allowed to flourish, why there is this jurisdictional chaos, we have to look back at the law itself. This is where the history of legal decisions creates a current state of, well, danger.
Yes, and this is where it gets really interesting and incredibly frustrating from a justice perspective. The sources cite scholars who point directly to one Supreme Court decision as a root cause of the MMIW crisis: the 1978 Oliphant v. Suquamish Indian Tribe decision.
Okay, Oliphant, tell us what that decision did in practical terms. What changed?
Before Oliphant, tribal courts had broader authority to deal with crimes on their lands. But this 1978 decision severely limited tribal authority to prosecute. Specifically, it ruled that tribes were limited in prosecuting crimes when the person involved, the alleged perpetrator, is non-Indian.
Wait, hang on. So the Supreme Court essentially told tribes they couldn't fully prosecute non-natives who commit crimes on tribal land. That sounds like a legal disaster waiting to happen.
It absolutely was, and many argue it continues to be. Because when you look at the data on violent crime against Indigenous people, it reveals a stark reality. Most Indigenous people who suffer violent crime suffer it at the hands of non-Indians.
So, by removing the tribe's ability to enforce the law against non-natives on reservation land, the decision created this huge legal loophole. Outsiders could potentially exploit this lack of local accountability.
Exactly. Jordan Gross, a professor at the University of Montana's School of Law, argues that following Oliphant, reservations effectively became, in his words, pockets of lawlessness. Non-Indians might perceive less risk because the bulk of the responsibility for investigation and detention falls solely to the FBI. And as we saw in Ashley's case, the FBI often doesn't show up for months if they get heavily involved at all.
Right. That puts the solution squarely in the structural reform category then. If the federal system has created this vacuum, what is the ultimate ask from advocates on the ground?
Lucchese, the founder of SBI, stated it very clearly. Tribal sovereignty is the only thing that's going to fix this issue. She argued, and many agree, that tribes must have the self-determination, the full authority to protect their people and hold all perpetrators accountable, regardless of their background or race. Until tribes regain that full jurisdiction, this crisis, this vulnerability will likely continue.
Well, that systemic change is glacially slow. Ashley's family has never stopped fighting. Their commitment is just astonishing. In 2018, her sister Kimberly Loring took the fight directly to Washington, D.C., testifying before Congress.
And she didn't mince words at all. She detailed the dysfunctional manner, her words, in which the BIA and tribal law enforcement handled the case from the very beginning. Her testimony was incredibly powerful because she moved beyond just theory and highlighted specific critical mistakes in the handling of potential evidence.
What were the specific details she brought up about the evidence mishandling?
She told Congress about the evidence the family found, that crucial sweater and the boots with the red stains. She stated that the sweater was actually misplaced by the authorities for a period, although it apparently resurfaced later. And perhaps most frustratingly for the family, years later, they still have not received the final DNA testing results on that evidence. That inability to get basic forensic information is just another layer of institutional failure adding to their pain.
Despite the initial coldness of the investigation, the FBI and BIA eventually did start pursuing leads, right? What accounts or alternative stories have emerged regarding Ashley's movements immediately after June 5th?
Yeah, eventually some information surfaced. A critical piece came from a man named Sam McDonald. He claimed he was actually with Ashley for several days after that party on June 5th. According to his account, on June 11th, 2017, so 6 days after the last confirmed sighting, he drove Ashley to meet someone known as V-Dog, whose real name was Paul Valenzuela.
Okay. And what happened next, according to McDonald's statement?
McDonald claims he fell asleep while they were waiting for Valenzuela, or perhaps after meeting him. The details seem a bit unclear in the sources. But the crucial part is, when McDonald woke up, Ashley was gone. Valenzuela was reportedly the last known person she was intending to meet.
And what do we know about this Paul Valenzuela? V-Dog?
Ashley's family confirmed she was romantically involved with him at the time, and the sources indicate he was known to law enforcement, having prior burglary and weapons convictions. These accounts are obviously part of the ongoing investigation, but we must be clear, there have been no arrests or charges filed regarding Ashley's disappearance to date. It remains unsolved.
So, despite all the public attention, the advocacy, the congressional testimony, what is the current official status of the case?
Both the FBI and the BIA have confirmed that the case remains officially open and active. That's the official line. The BIA has, in what seems like a positive step, created a dedicated webpage to finding missing and murdered individuals from Indian country, which now features Ashley's information.
It's a small consolation, I imagine, in what her sister Kimberly calls a nightmare of not knowing. Just devastating for the family. For you listening, Ashley Loring Heavyrunner is described as 5 foot 2 inches tall, weighing about 90 pounds. The family continues to search, continues to hold out hope.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture one last time, Ashley Loring Heavyrunner's case really underscores the critical importance of jurisdiction, resource allocation, and ultimately tribal self-determination in addressing the MMIW crisis. The failure to treat a missing person case seriously from the absolute start, compounded by these legal barriers stemming from decisions like Oliphant that essentially disarm tribal authorities on their own land, it transforms a personal tragedy into a systemic failure that continues to put thousands of Indigenous people, especially women and girls, at risk.
The ultimate synthesis here, though, it seems to me, is the power of documentation and public pressure. Despite that lack of federal urgency in those initial crucial months, the creation of databases by grassroots groups like the Sovereign Bodies Institute and the fierce public testimony by family members like Kimberly Loring, they're transforming these cold statistics into mandated action points. They are forcing official institutions like the BIA and FBI, however slowly, to keep these cases open and visible.
That community action, that family advocacy, it often becomes the only reliable audit available when the official systems fail to protect their citizens. It forces institutions eventually to reckon with the truth.
We really encourage you to look up Ashley's case and the vital efforts of the Sovereign Bodies Institute. If you happen to have any information regarding her disappearance, you can contact the BIA by texting BMU to 847-411 or contact the FBI or Blackfeet law enforcement directly. Thank you for diving deep with us today.